In this guide, we're going to go over all 4 of the new maps for Riot's new arena mode, going over some basic strategies and some advanced in-depth details. I'm Doglightning, I've peaked Challenger multiple times, and I've hit rank 1 on the PBE for this game mode, making me qualified to teach you. Make sure you follow the channel as I'll be uploading brand new guides every day for the next 5 days that I've already pre-recorded. On each of the maps, you're going to see these health plants. These health plants look like flowers, and what they do is when you auto them, they heal you and give you a shield. These are the most important objectives on the new map that you always want to be playing around. Denying these from the enemy is what's going to secure you wins. Even if you can't hit your skill shots, or even not the best player, if you are securing these, you are more likely to win versus opponents who might be even better than you. Each map also has a bunch of blast cones. I couldn't get all of them because it makes the map too cluttered, but every game 2 to 4 of them will spawn randomly, so make sure that you're using those to maneuver the map, and there's usually brushes. On top of that, when the game starts to get to the end, a fire zone will appear and start going in 4 different stages where it converges into a spot, stays, converges into a spot, stays, converges into a spot, stays, converges to the final circle, at which point it'll dissipate till nothing, and anyone outside that circle will get burned to death. So before we get into some advanced strategies for each of these maps, make sure you check out my stream also, as I'll be trying to hit top 100 in the first couple of days, so make sure you check that out. For this first map, the final zone will be converging here, meaning that controlling this center area is very important. Most of the game will be happening where the teams will be both going into the middle and fighting each other. But what happens if, for instance, the enemy team is just stronger than you at the start of a fight? Well, in this scenario, you can actually go around and play for these side plants. So while one team is taking control of the center, you can go get both these outer plants, get the extra shield, and then come back in and try to force a fight while you have an HP advantage from the shield. You can also come in, for instance, and start to trade with the enemy and then kite backwards towards your plant, at which point they might chase you or they might go to their own plant. You are always looking to get as many plants as possible, so if you do go to fight in the middle, what you usually want to do is fight and then try to get 2 autos off on the plant and then kite back to your own plant, so that you're getting an HP advantage on the enemy. Now, what can the enemy do to counter this kind of strategy? Well, to start off, I think it's really important for both teams to have the person who spawns closer to the other side to use a vision plant right in the middle here, which will actually give you some increased details. If, for instance, you're going towards the center and you used your vision plant here, and you see one of the enemies crossing over like this, you can pull back and try to defend your plant, at which point the other team will now be forced to just take their plant and try to go over and contest you for the plant here. Usually, range control the outside and melee control the inside. This is because if the melee try to go up and fight you for the plant here, it's very easy for range to hit their skill shots and abilities in this closed off area. Where on the flip side, in the open, if you're fighting here as melee versus range, you have more room to dodge skill shots and converge and get angles where you can sandwich the enemy in. Meaning that usually melee champions dominate the open space and usually range champions will be better off playing around the outside. So getting rid of one player on each side, let's just look at 1 versus 1 and what happens as the fire comes in. So the first fire comes in and all 3 plants are still available to melee. If you're in melee, a lot of times you're going to want to try and fight for these plants before they get out of your reach. As the second circle comes in, you are now at a point where this plant over here is no longer available for melee and only range can get it without walking outside the zone. But the melee can still get access to these 2 plants if they want to. As the zone comes in one more time, now we're at a point where this plant up here is completely cut off. If you're a champion with mobility, sometimes you can get over, hit the plant, and maybe blast cone back over, but for the most part, this plant is unavailable. And this plant over here, as a range, you can run out and hit it a couple times and get back in, only if you aren't being pressured by the melee. For instance, if Singed is staying in this bush, you can walk out and hit this plant a couple times, get back in with a little bit of an HP advantage. Usually at this point in the map, melee are controlling this side of the circle because again, the final circle will converge and eventually be only on this side. So usually what's happening is the melee are standing here and range are usually trying to stay away from the melee. So they're standing here and trying to poke as much as they can and get as much of an HP advantage as they can. So that when the final zone comes in and they're here, they can try to either go over and fight them to the death, or as the final circle converges into nothingness, you can kite out and try to get this plant and survive longer than the Singe can last outside of the zone. So that's basically it. The only other thing I forgot to mention is that if these blast cones spawn, you can use them to go blind into the bush over the wall so that the enemy team won't see you in there. Alright, for the winter map, this is the most unbalanced map in my opinion in terms of starting the game, because inherently the team that spawns on the bottom left side will instantly have access to 2 plants, where the team on the top side will only have access to 1, and if they want to secure a second plant, they're going to have to bully their way in and fight for it. Now you might be asking, What is the advantage for the other team? Well, there is actually an advantage. The final circle will actually converge on this side of the map, meaning that the team that spawns with the 2 plants, well, they'll be getting an HP advantage. They will eventually have to fight their way in, where the team that spawned on this side of the map can just play defense, never ever push the enemy, and just wait for the enemy to come to them. So that's the advantages and disadvantages to both sides. How to play around this? Well, there's a couple strategies. For one, if you are melee on this side and you don't think you can just bully your way through, you can actually try and do a flank. So you can both go around the side and flank. And if these guys are usually having, say, one person go over here to punish or go get a plant, you can come over here and end up maybe sometimes finding a 2v1, at which point you can fight for this plant and bully them down. At which point here, these guys will not want to go down here, because if they go down here to the plant, they're going to get trapped in by the melee and be in a very rushed position. Meaning that if you pull this flank off, the other team will usually have to kite back to this plant, and you can actually have bullied your way into securing double plants for yourself. This would also work for range, but it's better for strategy for melee on that side. How you can counter this if your range is, if you're starting off the game and you're going like this person can put their vision here, and if they don't see any of the other 2 coming, you can come over and get ready to defend your other plant in the fight that's about to ensue. All right, flipping it around, how should they play it on the other side? Well, if you are melee on this side, I would probably recommend you just do the same thing. You pick up your 2 plants and you try to fight the enemy with your HP advantage. But what should range do? Well, range, again, you can do the same thing where you just sit here and just use your abilities to hit them and kite backwards as they come through, right? And try to kite around to this plant up here. If the plant's not there, you can still just keep cutting back and get an HP advantage that way. Another strategy is the same thing as the double range can just rush this way, or you can come over here with one range and use a vision cone over the wall and auto attack it from over the wall, while the other range comes over here and you can try to secure 2 plants that way. As you can see, again, you're always looking in these games how to secure the most plants as possible. It's more important than fighting a lot of the times, especially in early rounds where people have small amounts of HP. So getting rid of 1 melee and 1 range on each time to show easier how the end game works. As the first circle comes in, all 3 plants are still available for both range and melee. And as a melee, if you can get control of this corner of the map for when this happens, you can get yourself an HP advantage. As the circle gets smaller, now all of a sudden 2 plants are outside of the circle. If Tarek tries to walk out here, he could end up getting rooted and CC'd by Nico outside and end up losing more HP than it's worth. But Tarek can go over and still get this plant that's still available. A lot of the times this blast cone spawns on this map, and you can, if you were fighting over here as this circle comes, you can blast cone over. And as the range, what you want to do is as he's getting that, you want to get this plant, kite back, and as he's coming, you can hit him and kite backwards towards this plant and keep hitting this plant to keep getting an HP advantage as much as possible. As the third circle comes in, now neither plant are really available for either. These 2 plants, even as range, if you want to go out, you're going to be taking damage, and if Tarek CCs you out of the map, you're going to take a lot of damage. But sometimes, if you're bullying the enemy players, sometimes they run away from you and you can find a second to get it. Also, this plant up here is still reachable by range from within the zone. Finally, the final circle converges, and as a range, we're usually playing on this side, trying to secure these 2 plants, and the melee are going to be usually playing the inside, and at this point, you're basically going to be forced to go in and fight. But as the final circle converges, you're going to try and race out and again, hit one of these cones or one of these flowers, because you're going to get an advantage before the melee can hit it. There are many ways to play this map and strategies, but this is a good strategies to take. Another thing to note is that if this blast cone spawns, you can hit it to get into this bush. A lot of the times, actually, when you go for this flower, and if the enemy's chasing you in, you'll hit it and then go hide in the bush to try and drag them in. And another cool little thing is this little pocket up here. You can sometimes lose the enemy and hide in here. For instance, if you were like a Fiddlesticks and the enemy was chasing you up, you could hide in here and then ult you over the wall. It's a really cool little pocket that's there, and you can also use this blast cone over to get into it. Alright, the grass map. This map is the most basic out of all the maps, and there's not too much to say about it. At the very start of the game, there's only one flower, so both teams are going to usually converge straight into the middle to try and fight for this flower. Sometimes one team will be stronger than the other, and whichever one does will bully the other out. A lot of the times, range are going to want to try and play around this bush. As the melee come in, they can use their advantage of range to try and hit them from over the wall and bully them out. As a range advantage, you should usually be getting 2 autos, because as the melee are running into the plant, each of you can get an auto in from range and the melee can't. But say the melee early were able to bully straight out, that's okay. On this map, what you want to do is whichever team gets control of the plant, usually what happens is the secondary team goes and plays hard on the outside. Because remember, the plants give a shield. And if you avoid the enemy until the shield's down, then they aren't going to have that advantage. And the same goes for the other way. If the range got an advantage and came in and got the plant, the melee would run away and just chill and wait till the shields are gone. A good strategy for the team that gets the middle is only auto the plant twice, one each to get a shield and leave one up. So you can run out and fight. And when the enemy team sees the shield's gone and they come in to fight you, you can kite backwards towards the plant and still have one auto left on the plant. For the circles, the first circle comes in and basically knocks out this outer ring of the map. You now have to play within the inside. Your most open space are going to be these pockets on the top and the bottom to kite and maneuver around. On the second circle, it's even more. Now you can no longer play really on this top side that I was saying, and you're more just playing on this inner ring, kiting around and making sure that the melee can't touch you. A lot of the times by this point, the melee are just going to control the center, and you're just going to keep trying to kite around and try to get as many autos in the plants when they spawn. On this circle, you are now basically forced to be playing the inside, and let's get rid of one each so it's easier to see. The thing about this is a lot of champions can knock you out of the map, and it's a very thin line around the outside. At this point, you are basically forced to fight the enemy mid person controlling the mid. I will say this map is one of the maps that more heavily favors melee champions because of the fact that you are constricted to this small area. Once the circle starts to come in, you're really doomed. So as a range versus melee in this lobby, you really want to try and get kills and finish it off before the circle starts to come in. Because as you get to the final circle, you are basically just in a small circle forced to fight with nowhere to hide, nowhere to kite, and usually one of these flowers spawns at the same time as this circle comes, so you're going to be trying to get as many of those as possible, and yeah, just bully it out. Other than that, there isn't much more to say about this map. It's a very simple map, but a very fun map at the same time. And finally, one of the most interesting maps, I think it's kind of like a volcano map. The final circle actually converges into the middle here, meaning that you want to be controlling this center area as best as possible. And this is actually a map that favors, the last map favored melee controlling the center, and this one favors range controlling the center, as this big pillar allows range to kite around and keep the melee out. So that being said, how does this map usually get played? Well, usually this map, how it goes is that the range are going to want to go push to the middle, and melee are going to want to either push to the top or the bottom. Most of the time in the games you're going to see, because people don't know how to play this map, the melee are just going to default go to the bottom because they have the bushes to control space, and the range are going to go like this. And basically what happens is as this spawns and they try to walk up, the range are going to CC them, and the range are usually going to get 2 autos on this plant, while the melee are only going to get 1, at which point as they come to funnel in, you can kite back and get the second plant. Again, this is a very range favor map because as range into melee, you're going to be able to get 2 of this plant and all 3 of this plant, while the enemy team only gets 1. Now, as I said, the other team can go and flank around the back. These pillars are actually really good for losing vision. So if you go all the way around the outside, you can actually sneak behind, and the other team might think that you're in the bush here, at which point when this plant spawns, you can go over and maybe steal this plant and get all 3 while this team was distracted, or you can just come in and find a flank team fight to force the other team to fall all the way back to this bush, at which point you can fight for this plant, get 1 auto on it while they get 2, and then kite back to this plant and get all 3. Usually you don't want to go straight to the center as melee, because if you go straight to the center, you're going to end up just getting poked out, bullied out, and end up having to kite back into a bad position where you might lose control of both plants completely. Another strategy for this map is a 1-in-1 strategy. This would usually be really good if you have a range and melee, but you can't do it with anything where both teams range go top, both teams melee go bot, and you kind of just have like a 1v1 versus each other and then try to get control. This would be if you have a lot of faith in your partner and your matchups. At the start of the match, you can see who spawned on each side. So if you see that, Nico spawned here and Kaisa spawned here, and you see on the other side that Singe spawned here and Tarek spawned here, and you go, okay, Nico versus Tarek can't touch me, I'm gonna go down here and fight Tarek, and you tell your teammate, hey, just kite Singe backwards, it's okay if you lose ground, kite down towards me, and we're gonna end up 2v1ing this Tarek. So that's another way you can play this map. Another way you can play this map is melee, is pretend this Singed is Kiana. So you can have the range going up top like this, and you can have the Kiana sneak behind like this, and have the Tarek come like this. And they're going to think that Kiana is in this bottom bush. They won't know. And as you come over to bully this Tarek, you can have Kiana come over him, for instance, hit a big ulti and hit them into the wall like this. So this map is very interesting. There's lots of ways to play it. Most people don't really play the zone up here, but it's actually, like, with all the vision loss, it's a very interesting place to play. One more thing to note, this bush here is quite interesting because when you're playing around this heal, you can, as range, go here and auto over the wall, maybe drop vision into this, make the melee come in and hit them and kite. Or if you have the augment that makes it that you need to channel 30% bonus damage before the match starts, you can walk in here and channel that. Interesting stuff. Going into the circle, let's get rid of 1 on each team. The first circle is this one, and it's not really that big of a difference. You're basically, the map hasn't changed because the only area you're losing is this area down here, which I've never ever seen anyone play in this area, and this upper area here, which again, I've never really seen anyone play there. So the first circle, basically nothing has changed. The second circle is when things get interesting. Now all this area here is cut off. From the bush here, you can't get around the outside without going outside the zone and taking damage, but you can go around here. Again, this area now becomes very contested area in space, and you're going to be playing around this center pillar here. As the next circle comes in, it's going to be basically you're stuck on this pillar, and as a range, you're just going to be kiting and trying to keep on the opposite side of the melee, playing ring around the Rosie, and they're going to be usually using these blast cones to try and get to you, and you're going to be trying to keep them kited while still getting the plant. As the final circle comes in, you're stuck in this area. There is a very slim area here where as range you can stand, but you literally can't move because as soon as you move even a small amount, you're going to be getting hit by fire. But from here, you can hit this plant, so it can be a good idea depending on the matchup. For instance, if I was facing a Poppy here, it'd be bad because Poppy could go here and push me straight out into the outside zone, and it would just not be good. A lot of the times in this part, you're going to be here, and as the circle gets really small and is about to disappear, you're going to run out and try to get this plant or this plant before the enemy. Other than that, there's not much more to say about this map. It's a very, very fun map in my opinion and very diverse in the strategies you can take. If you enjoyed this guide, again, remember to follow the channel as I'll be uploading 5 new guides for the next 5 days that I've pre-recorded, and I pre-recorded them so that I can spend the first days of this coming out grinding on my stream trying to hit top 100. So make sure you follow my stream if you want to see and learn from one of the best players how it's done.